Welcome to Compelling Topics, the only channel dedicated to the perspective of leading researchers from the Italian independent scene. Let's turn your minds on. Simonetta Torresi takes us on a journey that challenges everything we think we know about early medieval Europe. Starting from the figure of Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa and the hidden clues embedded in place names, she builds a provocative case. What if the geography of Charlemagne's empire has been fundamentally misunderstood? Through a meticulous reading of historical sources, local traditions, and toponymy, Torresi re-examines key events, such as the dramatic attack on Pope Leo III in 799 and the movements of Charlemagne leading up to his imperial coronation. Distances that seem impossible, timelines that strain credibility, and places that leave no material trace all become pieces of a larger puzzle. Was Paderborn really in Germany? Could Aachen have been in central Italy? And what happens when we place Charlemagne not beyond the Alps, but at the heart of the Apennines? In this video, Torresi invites us to look beyond official narratives and consider an alternative reconstruction of history, one rooted in geography, logic, and overlooked evidence. Simonetta Torresi opens her discussion with a figure she has examined at length in her books, Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, a leading figure in Augustan Rome, closely tied to the geography of central Italy. Torresi recalls that a certain locality took the name Vipsun precisely because Agrippa was born there. The place was renamed in his honor. This detail is not merely ornamental. For Torresi, toponymy, the study of place names, hamlets, castles, and waterways, is one of the primary tools for reconstructing a history that official historiography has often obscured or geographically displaced. That Agrippa was familiar with these territories, in her view, is beyond doubt. This premise introduces the theme of the evening, a journey with Charlemagne, and not only with him, through a series of historical events whose accepted geography, according to Torresi, must be radically reconsidered. In 795, Pope Leo III ascended to the papal throne. Torresi immediately highlights the nature of the relationship established between the new pontiff and the king of the Franks. Leo notified the king of his election almost in real time and adopted the practice of dating his pontificate according to the years of Charlemagne's reign. Torresi explicitly compares this choice to the dating system of the fascist era, in which years were counted from the regime's rise to power: first year, second year, third year of the fascist era. In the same way, Leo III reckoned the first, second, and third years of Charlemagne's reign. It is a clear signal of complete political alignment between the papacy and the Frankish monarchy. This context of mutual dependence is essential for understanding the dramatic events that unfolded on April 25, 799, the Feast of St. Mark. While Pope Leo III was riding in procession to celebrate the stational Mass in Rome, he was attacked and captured in a conspiracy orchestrated by two church dignitaries, Paschal, the Primicerius, and Campulus, the Sacellarius, the latter a nephew of the previous pope, Adrian. The conspirators belonged to the Roman nobility and represented a faction hostile both to the Pope and to Frankish influence. At first, they attempted to tear out the Pope's tongue and gouge out his eyes. Punishments that Torresi notes were far from unusual at the time, but they ultimately limited themselves to a formal deposition, confining Leo in the monastery of San Erasmo. At this point, Torresi moves beyond official historiography to consider what she calls the equally official but local history of Spoleto, noting that national historians systematically neglect local sources. News of the attack and of Leo III's peril spread quickly, and Ginsisis, Duke of Spoleto of Frankish origin, who was either in Rome or, as others say, near its borders, called his men to arms to free the pontiff. Torresi emphasizes Ginsisis' Frankish identity because, although the historical studies of Spoleto are long-standing and valuable, they tend to describe the Duchy of Spoleto as a Lombard entity. Yet at a certain point the Lombards had been defeated, and the duchy had passed to the Franks. Ginsisis therefore gathered his forces, likely summoning them from the Marche and the Macerata area, freed the Pope, and brought him to Spoleto. There, in the Basilica of St. Euphemia, Leo III was honored by clergy and lay people of every rank. Torresi lingers on the Church of St. Euphemia in Spoleto. Observing its structure, especially the rear section, she notes that the building resembles the famous Carolingian palaces she has discussed in previous lectures. It appears, she suggests, as though it had later been raised in the manner of Cluny, as if the original structure were this Carolingian-like edifice, subsequently elevated in the Cluniac style. Torresi hypothesizes that if Spoleto had entered Frankish territory, Charlemagne must certainly have had a palace and a chapel there. After the Carolingian period, the church would have been heightened, yet still preserves visible traces of its successive construction phases, unlike other official Carolingian buildings, as she will later argue. Here, Torresi develops the central issue of her analysis. The sources state that, once the Pope had been brought to Spoleto and honored with celebrations, Ginsisis immediately informed the king that the pontiff was in his custody. According to official historiography, the king was at that time in his palace in Paderborn, in Saxony, northern Germany, over 1,400 kilometers from Spoleto, with the Alps in between, and it was nearly summer. Torresi proceeds step by step. First, Ginsisis must know where Charlemagne is, not a given for an itinerant ruler. Second, someone must travel those 1,400 kilometers to deliver the news. Third, Charlemagne replies. Thus the message arrives, and someone returns another 1,400 kilometers to bring the response back to Spoleto. Fourth, the Pope himself travels to Paderborn, another 1,400 kilometers. Fifth, celebrations take place at the Frankish court. Sixth, the Roman conspirators, departing from Rome, even farther south, learn that the Pope is in Paderborn, set out, reach the court, and present their case to the king. Seventh, Charlemagne has the Pope escorted back to Rome by bishops, archbishops, and counts. By November 8, 799, the Pope was already back in Rome. Torresi totals the distances, 1,400 plus 1,400, the messenger's round trip, plus 1,400, the Pope's journey to Paderborn, plus 1,400, the Pope's return, already exceeds 5,000 kilometers, and in between there are celebrations, audiences, negotiations, all compressed into 7 months, from the attack on April 25th to the return to Rome on November 29th. How was this possible? Torresi asks. May, June, July, August, September, October, November. 7 months in which all these movements take place, while Charlemagne supposedly remained in Paderborn, a place where, moreover, as Torresi notes when looking at modern Paderborn, there is virtually nothing Carolingian. Torresi invites us to consider present-day Paderborn in Germany. There is a fine cathedral, rebuilt and restored, which to a trained eye appears clearly non-original. But of Charlemagne's palace, what official tradition claims was his great Saxon residence? There is nothing. Charlemagne is said to have built the palace, the cathedral, the castle in Paderborn, yet no trace remains. German archaeologists have searched and, as Torresi recalls quoting one of them, have found neither the tomb nor virtually anything else. The throne is considered a fake. Everything that exists was constructed in a single phase in the 19th century, like Notre Dame in Paris, like Cologne Cathedral, like Ulm Minster. Buildings presented as medieval but erected or entirely rebuilt in the 19th century. Torresi contrasts this material absence with the structural richness of Sant Eufemia in Spoleto, where all successive building phases can still be read because the structure is genuinely stratified over time. The difference, she suggests, is eloquent. Her alternative proposal arises from an observation made while traveling through the Valnerina. On the right side of the road appears the sign, Piedi Paterno. Torresi stops and reflects. The name means at the foot of Paterno, implying the existence of a settlement above called Paterno. Climbing upward, she indeed finds a castle and numerous other structures. The hamlet belongs to the municipality of Vallo di Nera, so named because it was the main crossing point of the Nera River, a site of great strategic importance in the Valnerina. The area preserves very ancient churches, including that of the hermit near the cemetery of Piedi Paterno, which may date back to the 9th or even 8th century, perhaps built upon even earlier structures. Torresi's thesis is that in the time of Charlemagne, there were two important places called Paterno or Paderborn, one in Saxony and another in Umbria, here in the Valnerina above present-day Vallo di Nera. If Charlemagne was at Umbrian Paterno, the distance from Spoleto shrinks to a few dozen kilometers, easily covered on horseback. Suddenly, the entire narrative of the sources becomes plausible. Ginsisis can immediately inform the king because he is nearby. The Roman conspirators can reach the court without impossible journeys. The Pope can travel and return to Rome by November without logistical miracles. The 5,000 kilometers collapse into something manageable. Torresi further suggests that between 799 and 800 Charlemagne had already begun negotiations with the Pope for his future imperial coronation. "I will defend you against your internal enemies. You will make me emperor." An agreement that becomes far more credible if the two parties were only a few days' journey apart, rather than separated by the Alps and 1,000 kilometers. The historian Alessandro Barbero, in his volume on Charlemagne, has the ruler set out directly from German Paderborn in the year 800 and arrive at the gates of Rome on November 23rd, where Leo III personally goes out to meet him 12 miles from the city. Charlemagne then spends, according to Barbero, 5 consecutive months in Rome between Christmas 800 and Easter 801. Although Torresi briefly notes that there are not technically 5 months between Christmas and Easter, but lets the point pass. However, in earlier talks Torresi had already documented that Charlemagne's route toward Rome touches a series of sites in central Italy. Ascoli Piceno, the abbey of Farfa along the Salaria Way, where local tradition holds that Charlemagne founded or visited numerous castles, the thermal baths of Acquasanta and San Salvatore on Mount Amiata. It is an itinerary that runs through the Marche, Umbria, and Tuscany, incompatible with a direct departure from Germany. Official historiography, Torresi observes, sometimes acknowledges this passage through Tuscany, yet Barbero ignores it entirely. In light of her thesis regarding an Umbrian Paterno, the picture becomes coherent. Charlemagne, already residing in his palace at Paterno in the Valnerina, undertakes in the years 799 to 800 this extended circuit through central Italy, forging alliances and consolidating his presence in the region before presenting himself in Rome for the imperial coronation of Christmas 800. A further confirmation of Charlemagne's presence in the Umbrian Marchigian area comes from a precisely documented natural event. On April 30th, 801, just days after Charlemagne had left Rome following the coronation celebrations, a devastating earthquake struck Spoleto. Historical records attest that Charlemagne was in Spoleto at the time, and that the tremor was felt as far as Aachen. Here Torresi applies her method rigorously. If Aachen were truly located in Germany, as official historiography maintains, the city now known as Aachen in the Rhineland, an earthquake with its epicenter in Spoleto that propagated that far would have to be of such magnitude as to leave half the continent in ruins. Not a single building should have remained standing. Torresi and her audience are well acquainted with Apennine earthquakes and know how destructive they can be even at short distances. It is, she argues, scientifically unthinkable that a Spoleto earthquake could be felt in Germany. If, however, Aachen is to be placed in the Val di Chianti, in the heart of the Marche, as Torresi argues on the basis of research presented in earlier lectures, then everything falls into place. Earthquakes affecting Umbria regularly propagate into the Marche, and vice versa. The same seismic zone, the same Apennine backbone. A Spoleto earthquake felt as far as a Marchigian Aachen is no geological miracle. It is the norm. Torresi adds a further indirect confirmation. In the same period when Charlemagne was in Spoleto, his son was in Ancona. A geographical distribution entirely consistent with an itinerant court operating within the Adriatic and Apennine regions of Italy, not with an empire centered in the Rhineland. A toponymic observation completes the picture. The Black Forest, the famous German Schwarzwald, is regarded by official historiography as a German reality. Torresi suggests instead that the name derives directly from the river Nera, which flows through the Umbrian Valnerina. The Black Forest would originally have been the dense, shadowy woodland along the Nera, thick, dark, impenetrable, and only later would the name have been transferred and applied to the German forest. A case analogous to Paderborn, a place name originating in central Italy and subsequently relocated beyond the Alps in later historical reconstruction. Torresi concludes her presentation with a broader reflection on the mechanism by which official history establishes itself while true history is erased. The issue, she argues, does not concern Charlemagne or medieval geography alone. It is a structural problem that cuts across all fields of knowledge. To illustrate this, Torresi cites the example of Vincenzo Tiberio, a physician from Molise who studied in Naples. Near a relative's home, Tiberio observed a curious phenomenon. People fell ill less frequently when a local well was contaminated with mold, and more often when it was cleaned. From this observation, he developed the theory that certain molds possessed antibacterial properties. He published his findings in scientific journals. He did not merely state them orally, but formally documented them. And he did so more than 25 years before Alexander Fleming. Yet the name everyone knows is Fleming. Fleming won the Nobel Prize. Fleming appears in textbooks from middle school to university. Vincenzo Tiberio remained in obscurity, remembered at most by a descendant seeking to restore his reputation, and by a street in Rome, Way Vincenzo Tiberio, placed symbolically opposite Way Fleming, a belated and almost clandestine acknowledgement, clearly tinged with irony. Torresi notes that a senior official, when interviewed on the matter, suggested that perhaps Tiberio lacked the financial means to assert himself, almost justifying his obscurity on the basis of insufficient resources. To Torresi, this response is symptomatic of the problem. Official history is not necessarily true history, but the history of those who had the power, the means, or the fortune to prevail, or, in some cases, the history deliberately constructed to serve particular interests. The risk of publishing books without a broad network of dissemination is, in Torresi's view, twofold. On the one hand, discoveries remain confined to a narrow circle and never reach school textbooks. On the other, they offer other researchers the opportunity to appropriate the ideas without citing the original source. This has already happened several times, she claims. For this reason, public dissemination, through broadcasts, debates, and communities, is essential. It is not enough to write. One must create a shared memory and multiply witnesses, so that the truth can neither be forgotten nor appropriated. The task of those who know the truth, Torresi concludes, is almost sacred, to share it with as many people as possible. A single individual is like a lamb among wolves, easily devoured. But if many hold the truth, the likelihood that it will finally come to light becomes real. And that risk, the risk that the truth will emerge, is precisely what Torresi seeks to bring about. That's all for today. See you in the next episode of The Very Origin of Europe, here on Compelling Topics.
I went to